What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100,000.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Alaska Airlines.
My name's Ben Grebe. I'm from Everett, Washington. I was wondering when Shawn Springs was going to play both sides of the ball, wide receiver and quarterback, all pro both ways.
Whenever Coach Holmgren decides to put me on that side of the ball, I don't think it's no time soon, but hopefully one day maybe.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. And I have a panel today, which I will formally introduce with Tracy, Donte, and Shawn. But before I do, I always like to point out other interesting interviews you should check out on the podcast. This is appropriate for past professional athletes turned business leader, entrepreneur. I had the founder of Big League Chew, Rob Nelson. He was just sitting in the dugout, and he just didn't want to chew the tobacco. And so he created the shredded gum, which we know now is Big League Chew. We had Chris Gronkowski, who created the ice shaker. I don't know if people have seen him on Shark Tank with him and his brothers on the show. That was a good one. And the group interview with Wendell Davis, Brent Novoselsky, and Jamara Williams. And they talked about the transition from NFL to business. So check on that and many more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to, connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And we do that by helping you run your podcast. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and the companies I admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about starting a podcast, you should. Go to rise25.com and email us if you have any questions. And today's guests formally introduce Tracy Deforge, is CEO and co-founder of The Players Impact. The Players Impact is a platform built to empower athletes in business exclusively for current and former professional athletes looking to preserve and build wealth through their premier private market investment opportunities. Some of their community members, which we'll talk about, Tracy McGrady, Gabby Douglas, and many more, and their portfolio companies, Cameo, DraftKings, Robinhood. And, for each of you, I pulled out a couple fun facts. Maybe some people know them. Maybe some people don't know them. So I know you're all a little worried. What did he find on me on the internet?
I'm worried. I'm upside down. I'm good.
Shawn, I have a
upside down. I have nothing to worry about.
Shawn, I have a great one for you, which I'm going to mention. And Donte, I have a great one for you too. But for Tracy's specifically, people probably know you earned your JD at Seton Hall, that you worked for the NHL, Major League Baseball. I don't know if everyone would know that you are a 6-time marathon runner and Division I athlete and 2018 Haymakers for Hope fighter. Maybe some people know that, maybe not. As Shawn Springs, CEO of Windpact, wants to protect the next generation of kids. His inspiration behind founding Windpact was stemmed from his 13 seasons playing in the NFL, and drafted 3rd overall in the first round in 97, and spent time with 3 teams, the Seahawks, Washington, and New England Patriots, and was in the Pro Bowl. And obviously, both Donte and Shawn played for Ohio State. But fun fact for you, Shawn, I don't know if people would know this, okay? Was undefeated, and I don't know if this is even true, but undefeated one-on-one street basketball.
In the streets, also street basketball. Now you say that,
it was such a random fact.
True.
And I was gonna say you lost to my friend Michael Goldstein at Silver Spring, but it wasn't Michael Goldstein. It was I have here that John West. So is that true? You were undefeated in one-on-one street basketball for the longest time.
Yeah, I was pretty good at basketball.
Okay, there you go.
All athletes, they can play multiple sports. You know, I told Coach Thompson at Georgetown one time, I said, I probably should have went to Georgetown between me and Allen Iverson, but, you know, he said, he said, you made the right decision. Go play football.
Exactly. Another fun fact is, most people know that your dad played in the NFL for many years, but I don't know if they know that your mom served in the Army. And so that's a fun fact. And Donte Whitner, 11-year NFL veteran, 3-time Pro Bowler, 8th overall pick in the 2006 NFL Draft, All-American at Ohio State, NFL TV analyst with NBC Sports, and many. What's that?
CBS.
Came out.
Yeah, I picked up college with CBS now. So we got
and with CBS Sports, and partner and on the athlete advisory board at Kirtland Hills Capital. Donte, your fun fact. So, you took the biggest hit of your life, and it wasn't in the NFL. Okay. And I don't know if most people know this, but at age 6, you were hit by a car chasing after football and had up to 30 fractures in your legs. And they thought you may never walk, actually. So, what's that?
Yeah, or play sports. You know, sports. Not supposed to walk, and then sports was, not even a thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. Also, first career game, you got your first interception. And who was the interception against? People ask.
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. Exactly. Tom Brady.
Star, right? He thought he had me beat on the route late in the fourth quarter. I flipped my hips, picked it off, ran it back. And guess who flipped? Another Buckeye. Nate Clemens. Nate Clemens flipped somebody in the back. They call it back. They lose the game.
It would be Nate.
It would be Nate, right? I think it might have been Nate, right? He's like, this guy's going to change the culture. That's right. Like, no, we can't let him do this game. One. So he clipped. Tom Brady drove down, beat us.
Because you scored a touchdown on that interception, right? And they called it back.
Yeah, with a minute left in the game, right? To win it. And then Nate didn't even have to do it. I jumped over the guy anyway. Running back instincts kicked in.
Terrible.
Nate Clemens. Bad day.
I think did he grow up in Shaker Heights? Or I can't remember. Shaker Heights. Yeah.
Cleveland boys.
Cleveland.
So thank you all for being here, and so much to talk about. But I know the biggest thing on your mind is educating athletes in business. So I want to start there. And Donte, why don't you start with some of the advice on educating athletes in business?
Well, first and foremost, we have to change the mindset. And until you change the mindset, until you understand that you, as the athletes, you have the power, you can never utilize that power. So what I mean by that is the people that get the top deal flow in any certain type of business industry is family offices, athletes, and entertainers. But if you let the middleman and the people that really control, the gatekeepers, say, oh, we control the power over here, you have to come through us, give us a little bit, and then we'll give you the opportunity to enter the door, then we'll lose every time. So until we change the mindset and start to understand that, we can't even go into the conversation about business. So the athletes out there need to understand that you hold the power, and any company out there that you want to talk to, right, you can go directly and you can talk to them, right? Change the mindset. And once we change the mindset, then we can talk about investing. And I'm really into all three phases, and it goes down to private equity, venture capital, and the public markets. And in each industry, it has its highs and it has its lows. It has its pitfalls and it has its great days. And, I think that's where we should start.
Love it. Tracy, you work with a lot of athletes, obviously with the Players Impact. Talk about educating athletes in business.
I'll echo what Donte said, right? It changes the mindset. Athletes are so focused on their sport and their craft. They are oftentimes blinders down. They have to, right? They're encouraged to just focus on what you need to do to get to the next level.
And then when I'll jump in with that, sorry, Tracy, is with the education is you have to find the people in every industry. If you're an NFL player, you're top 1% in your league. Get the people in venture capital, get the people in private equity, get the people in the public markets that's top 1% in their field. Before you even understand that, you got to know how to vet these people and understand, can you trust them? Are they the top in their industry? So you have to take a step back first and ask these hard questions. And once you figure out who the best in your field is and you can trust them, then you can have the conversation about, okay, how should I invest my money? Where should I put it? And Tracy is one those people. You can come to her and you can ask her, hey, and she's trustworthy. She understands the industry. She's been doing it for a long time. She's one of the people that you can trust. There's a lot of people out there that attack athletes basically because they know that they're not sophisticated and they won't do the due diligence, right? And they'll just give them the money. And that's not the way it should go. We have to change that first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. And that empowerment as the athlete who's typically dependent on agents or financial advisors or others that are surrounding themselves with it, they often sort of say, okay, that'll get handled by someone else. And they really have to take ownership of where their future is going to be. The same way they did with their sport, they need to have their financial future.
And even when you look into the venture world, 4% of the companies and the people make up all 100% of the returns.
Yeah.
So it's 96% of the people don't know what they're talking about. You see? So it's this group of people that know, and there's other group that fake like they know, and they lose you money all the time. So that's what you need to figure out when it goes to venture. And in the public world, when you're investing your money in stocks and bonds, you can invest in the S&P 500 and get 10% over a 10-year span. Majority of the people that you give to invest your money, they're returning 5%. Why would you pay them 1.5 basis points, 1 basis point to underperform something that's free? So until we understand all of these numbers and this terminology and what's going on and the manipulation behind it all, we can't change it.
Shawn, what is some of the advice for you educating athletes in business? I know you, I believe, have a couple patents with your company and with Windpact and doing some cool things. I'm sure you get a lot of people asking you for advice.
Yeah, well, one of the interesting things, since we're on the topic of mindset, the challenge oftentimes as an athlete is you are told to be hyper-focused. You are told that this is your profession, this is your career, this is what you should be into, and this is really all you should be focused on. But when you think about it, oftentimes as an athlete, we have dual roles. So when we're at work, we're at work, and then when we go home, we're a parent and we're a dad. So part of changing that mindset is saying we want the same qualities that make you a great athlete: your dedication, your determination, your discipline, your work ethic. Now, but the challenge is, how do you switch that hat and say, all right, now, because I'm supposed to be really focused on my business, I should let my attorneys, my financial planners, those guys do it. But you know what? Let me switch that hat. And sometimes I tell Tracy, me and Tracy talked about it a few months ago at the Opal conferences. When I'm in doing business, I have the qualities of athletes, but I'm really a tech CEO at this point, right? So part of it is changing. You're saying, you know what, now it's time for me when I'm in the off season, when I'm looking at deals, now I got to think, I have the same qualities because I am who I am. I play for the 49ers, I play for the Bears, I play for the Golden State Warriors. But when I switch that hat to being an entrepreneur, I need to think about, like what Donte said, who are the right people or right sectors or things that I'm interested in. And oftentimes, I think it's intimidating because athletes feel like it's too much learning to understand fintech or crypto or additive manufacturing or robotics, all some of the things that are future. So they get intimidated and they rely on people to say.
Well, athletes, everyone. When I hear that,
that's what I say too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it has to be everyone. So I think part of it is just being able to change the mindset, like Donte say, I am an athlete, but also I need to be able to focus and say, when I'm doing this, I'm taking those same athletic principles to making sure that I'm having the success. I'll work everybody.
And another thing on the psychological level when it comes to that is when you come into an NFL, NBA, MLB, and you're set up systematically NHL, like that, NHL, all professional athletes, when you come in and you're systematically set up like that and you have everybody doing everything for you, this is how they stick their hooks into you to make you feel like you need them and you have to depend on them. And you can't do anything without these people. So if you say you're doing that for your entire career, now your career ends, transition comes, you don't know how to do anything for yourself. You don't know how to think for yourself. And this is the hardest time in your life is when you transition from a professional sport to normal society. It's the toughest thing. And once you have all these people with their hooks in you and they never allowed you to do anything on your own, never allowed you to step outside your comfort zone, now you're in trouble. So if you can do this while you're playing and you can really focus during the off season, travel to some of these companies in Silicon Valley, reach out to them, send them an email, contact them on Instagram. Instagram all day anyway. It's just a bunch of companies that you can contact, you can go there, you can visit, you can understand the structure of the company.
Oftentimes, to your point, Donte, they want you to come visit.
They want you to come visit. It's good for them.
Right.
So this is what,
They're excited. Oh, yeah, my son watches you, so they want you to come and they love give you the information to be able to educate you and say, it's cool. Yeah. Donte Whitner from Cleveland, he went to Lubrizol, right, which is top chemical company in the world. They'd be all pumped about that.
And I have to say, you guys were the top, the brand names on the field, right? But the Players Impact is all about making sure that our athletes know that they are a brand unto themselves, even if they were the second string or they play a more obscure sport. Athletes are actively playing, no matter what sport it is or what level you play at, have those same opportunities and should make sure that they're availing themselves to them.
Totally. And then I want to, on that topic, talk about some advice from mentors in business or in sports. And Shawn, I want to start with you because there's two that stick out for me, for you, which is your dad. Your dad probably planted that seed of there is life after sports. There is a shelf life of a typical NFL player. It's not like, you guys played for many seasons, but that's not normal, right? Normal, what is 3 or 4 years? I don't know what the average is, but what did your dad tell you, Shawn, about what you should be preparing for, even while you're starting your career?
My dad, you're absolutely right, was a big influence in my life. And he was just like, football is a platform. And you get this window of time where you can amass a lot of money, but always be thinking about that this is not the end all be all for you. At some point that will end. You're still a pretty young man. And one of the things he's encouraged me to do is kind of what Donte is talking about is people invite business leaders to your suite. So I would have Washington Mutual or somebody in the suite, and they would want to come to the game and bring their kids down. They would want to meet me. I would shake their hands and I would ask them questions. So one of the things that my dad challenged me to do is develop ties in the community, whether it's Seattle, Washington, D.C., or New England. Start to know who those people are, because if you're developing relationships now when they want to talk to you, guess who you can call and pick up the phone when you needed some advice. Hey, I'm a young CEO. I'm starting this company, and we call it Windpact. Hey, how do you think about hiring? How do you think about these type of employees? How do you think about that? And I have a network of CEOs and leaders that I call, from Keith Wendell, who was number 2 at Johnson Control, ran Harley Davidson, to Mike Milligan, who was the global president of Verizon Sales, ran over billions of dollars from Verizon. And all these people have experience, and both Donte and I can tell you, when you find a good coach, that's when you know you're going to win. So you find bad when you know. Right. So, but if you have a good coach and those guys are your type of coaches, you got to be able to lean on that network. And I would rest in peace to Paul Allen. He was Mr. Allen, who bought the Seahawks, who, I was his first draft pick. Most people know Mr. Allen because he founded Microsoft with Bill Gates. But he was a great mentor of mine. He was telling me about data and technology 97, 98 back in Seattle, and at the Silicon Forest today, right? But that's who inspired me to be in the tech.
But to be able to reach out to these people, you have to drop your ego. This is somebody without an ego. A lot of athletes beating on their chest, I'm making a little money, I think I'm the man, I'm smelling myself. I don't want to reach out to these people because I don't have to, right? But then when that door shut on you and you want to reach out, then I will talk to you then. So it's about dropping your ego, understanding where you are now, being able to see around the corner and reach out to a lot of these companies and put yourself in position for when you transfer into something else.
And I guess to that point, Donte, how do you think that you were able to do it? Because it was a companies you were interested in? Because people always ask me, what type of companies? And I was just like, for me, it was like companies I like. I was like, oh yeah, you guys do that? I like that company.
Well, I've always been somebody that just wanted to learn everything. Yeah. So it was like, not even a company I like or I want to be involved with. It's like, how do you do what you do? I don't know. That's incredible. So can you tell me how you do this? Right. A lot of people are afraid to be like, hey, can you tell me how you did that? They'll just speculate or perceive it any way they want, but they will never ask. And that's how I was. I was just like, even in Buffalo, New York, I had 2 young ladies that worked for me, Tracy Deforge and Danielle. And they would go out to every company in the community and say, hey, do you want to come to this box similar to what you did? Right. And then when I met James, Bob O'Brien, Randy Carver. Bob O'Brien used to own the Brooklyn Nets. So I was like, Bob, can you tell me how you did that with the real estate and I think it was, what was it, Brookstone, not Brookford, something Forest, that they owned it, and they lost it sort of to the Russian owner, and then he sold it. But I ask all these people questions all the time, like, how did you do that? And most of the time it's like, oh, I was poor and I came for this and I grinded, I persevered, and this is what I did. And I'm like, okay, let me take a note with that.
That I just want to accent on that is that vulnerability, right? Of asking questions, dropping the ego to say, you don't know what you don't know, and you have to be able to ask and not be so full of yourself at any point in time that you're not curious to know. And I think that's sort of the environment that we try to foster, is that everyone, similar stories, right? You did the same thing. So how do we encourage everyone to do that and not feel like it's an unsafe environment for them to expose themselves for not knowing certain things?
And I think it's changing. I would give the NBA guys, I think they're probably about 5 to 10 years a little ahead of the NFL. But I think it's changing this, back like 20 years ago, you watched the movie. One of my favorite football movies, Wildcat.
I love that movie, yeah.
Wildcat. But there was always the stigma of athlete in the movie not being smart, except for the quarterback. He always had a pretty cheerleader. But, and now you see these guys, these brothers, Steph Curry, KD, LeBron. I mean, those are the big names you know about it, but it's Andre Iguodala, who's an animal, Chris Bosh. I mean, and I'm starting to see, Ryan Neeson, next play Capital, Isaiah Kaspersky. Now that I know Donte and these guys, Malcolm Jenkins, Ohio State, you're starting to see these guys now saying, you know what, we are, it blows my mind. People say, you have material scientists, you have like scientists, how did you even get in that space? It's like, well, I asked him, I felt that you were the best. Like what Donte is saying, oh, you're the top group in the world that does modeling and simulation. Everything in the world is going to be digital anyway, so why can't I work with you? But it takes a little homework. It takes being able to see that and ask questions and humble yourself a little bit too.
Then even with the NFL, there's so much testosterone floating around that locker room.
Yes,
and you're always competing with yourself. And everything is like NBA everywhere. NHL, I was like, you're always competing. There's so much testosterone, and it's hard to break from that. To saying, okay, I'm going to humble myself, and I'm not going to walk around here and act real macho. I'm going to ask questions. So code switch. You have to have a little empathy for them as well.
Yeah, code switch, so Donte. You don't act like the way, like in Glenville, the way you act.
I know. It's called maturity. It's called wisdom. It's called growth. But it took a while. Like you have to really rid yourself of that. And that's why I did all the hot yoga and all the meditation and all that stuff. It helps you get to this point to where you can understand, ask questions.
And it also doesn't have to be a fire hose of information, right? You don't have to take it all in at once, right? Think about little tiny doses of just education, micro learning, experiencing different things. It can be over a period of time.
And if you look, one more thing, if guys out there really aren't interested yet, if you look where all the money is in the world right now, it's in venture and private equity, and that's where it's at. You look, you see Google, and you see Microsoft, and you see Nike is really a technology company now as well. All the top companies are technology based now, so it's time to get on board. You make way more money doing this than you do playing basketball, football, any sport.
Yeah, but people are going to argue, well, the financial planners are, the risk is much higher too. The risk is more too. So you have to be wary of that. So that's why sometimes you do have to be with the entry zones and the Players Impact Fund. You got to make sure that you're with the smart people. But before we never had access to it. So I will say that the world is changing. And it's going to be people like yourself, and myself as an entrepreneur. I can tell you right now, hey, information age is coming. Additive manufacturing is killing. If you look at all these SPACs, you look at all Desktop Auto, X1, all these billion-dollar companies, they're coming into additive space. Why is that so important? Well, infrastructure, we're trying to put people's houses on Mars. So I would say, hey, man, in 20 years, they're going to be printing houses on Mars. In fact, I was at Carnegie Mellon, this school, they print organs. Like it is 3D printing, this type of stuff. And then you got entrepreneurs and he's a VC, he's the money guy.
I was going to step back on that because it is risky. That's why you have to have your base set in the public markets where you're producing dividends that pay your bills.
Right.
Once you have that set, you have your bill set, now you can take more risk going up the ladder.
Yeah,
you can get into venture capital, you can get into private equity, you can take 5% of your net worth. You can say, okay, I might make 20, 30X here. Let me have a little play money to the side and see if I can hit on a bunch of these different companies and spread them around. But yeah, once you have that base, this is a risky asset class. So then you play with that, but you have that base set first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said about ego, vulnerability, and then Donte with obviously diversification. I'd love to hear, Donte, your mentors, you mentioned Shawn, Paul Allen, your dad. Donte, who are some of your mentors in business or in sports with that transition?
Well, James Luckard, my partner at Curlin Hills Capital. A lot of these things we've learned over the last 5 years. We've been through the ups and downs and the manipulation trails of VC companies and private equity firms and mislanguage in contracts. So I would say first and foremost, James Luckard. And then I would say Randy Carver. He has Randy Carver Financial. He's one of the top in Ohio. I think he has 1.7 billion assets under management. Bob and Ann O'Brien, husband and wife, used to own the Brooklyn Nets. So these are people that I talk to on a constant basis, and they're in different industries. And I can go to them and I can ask them and send them a message like, how did you do that? Right? How did you do this? Like, what were you thinking when you bought this community in Naples? Or what were you thinking when you did this? Like, community.
like New Albany.
Yeah, not one house. We're talking about a whole area. Whole area, right?
You got a zip code under your belt.
Yeah, so these are the people that you want to ask questions for. And I always felt like I wanted to ask questions for people that didn't look like me and didn't talk like me. Because a lot of times when we come from our communities we get so caught up in, okay, I'm just going to keep it real. I'm going to keep all the same people around forever. Well, I don't think that's necessarily growth. It's not necessarily growth because if you're not around people that don't look like you, come from the same community as you, speak like you, probably about on the same knowledge level, you're never going to learn anything, right? So we need to get out of that. Oh, just hang around the homies all day. No, that has to go out the window.
Well, let me ask you this, Donte, because I know a lot of guys that I played with, said, well, I'm just okay just putting my 10% in the S&P 500. So I always ask myself, like, how the hell did I want to be in the tech? But why? But I mean, that's part of it too. I think, part of it is you have to know yourself, right? Like if you're comfortable with that, you have to know yourself. There's a reason, and I don't want to discredit none of this conversation, but it's a reason why Donte was the eighth pick. He's a different type of animal. And know yourself. That's all know yourself, right? So that's all I'm saying.
That's super important conversation because oftentimes, you said it, athletes possess the qualities to be an entrepreneur. Grit, determination. Yep. You did not get to where you were because you didn't have that.
Right.
But just because you share those qualities and characteristics doesn't mean you should be an entrepreneur.
Right.
You've got to know yourself,
you got to know
risk
yourself.
tolerance, how you're going to drive towards something that you don't know to ask those questions. And that's really important because I think that's what we're seeing a lot of is athletes saying, well, I should be an entrepreneur. And they don't have the right coaching, the right infrastructure, the right ideas to bring to fruition. And that's you got to know yourself.
Know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy, for you, and by the way, I love that. That is just as an interviewer in general, just going to someone says, how did you do that? People want to help. And I remember when I interviewed the co-founder of Pixar, I asked him, like, how'd you do it? He went on for 30 minutes of like the most fascinating stories in the world. So you ask someone that question and just go just with vulnerability, without an ego, and ask them. And people want to share their story and what they did. So I love that. Donte, I mean, that's so powerful.
And if you tilt your head slightly to the left or the right, they'll continue to talk. That's the truth. Yeah, not every once in a while. You tilt your head just slightly, they'll continue.
I love it. Tracy, what about you or mentors for you in business?
That's a great question. Mentors.
Besides Shawn Springs or something.
Yeah.
Besides me, besides me, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I was fortunate enough to take a role at the National Hockey League right out of law school and working with some of the best, the one percenters that out of the best law schools to work at the league level, really took me under their wing, teaching me on the business side, which really helped my self-discovery about know yourself. When I started working at MLB.com, that's when I figured with the brilliance of Bob Bowman that started that company, and we started, with a brand and budget, unlike most startups, but we were building something from nothing. And that's where I learned more about myself, loving that entrepreneurial journey, building something from nothing. So I would say those experiences really helped shape where we are today.
And you ran marathon, so you're tough.
Yeah. He forgot that I'm a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I gotta drop that.
I love that.
Yeah. You guys,
I know we have a little bit of time left. So I just wanted to kind of end on this, which is maybe a quick high and a quick low in business, because even in whether it's sports or business, people only see the high. They see you, in the end zone. They see you with the interception. They don't see all of the grit and all the practice that it took to get there and some of the low points. So I love to have you each just talk about a quick high and a quick low, because there is a flip side to this. So Shawn, do you want to start with what would be a high point and a low point?
Well, I will tell you, as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of high points and a lot of low points. To pick one, maybe a high point is for me is just the fact that it feels good to be. I could pick several, but when you see a product on the market, right? For example, we had a catcher's mask in the Olympics, right? That's a high point, because you actually are. That product was work done with Evo Shield and Wilson, and it was in the Olympics. It was girls softball, and it was more cool because it's a cool product and it saves lives. But you're working with companies like Hewlett Packard is a high too. A low for me is some of the learning curve of when you hire the wrong employee sometimes, and it's hard when you're trying to build a team, and then you might have to let a team member go. So it's one of those things where that's always hard in business. Like, how do you make sure you have the right team? Because and Donte probably can elaborate on it more. As athletes, we expect much more than what the regular person in the world to do, right? Because we are grinders, and we will work and we will work. But that's not always the case, and not everybody shares that same type of work ethic and value that we see. So sometimes it's the challenge being a new CEO is hiring the right team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Donte, what about you? Hey,
my high is pretty much the journey of time, value, money, and the understanding of it. And from things that I used to do, like, listen, when I first got in the league, I was 20 years old. So when they handed me a few $1 million, it was like, man, I'm partying, I'm gonna buy jewelry, I'm gonna get multiple houses, I'm gonna do whatever I want, right? But then when you go on this journey and you start to understand the time value of money, how much you could possibly waste, and you start to invest, and you start to see deals mature. And you get into, for example, we have a deal with Trident Coffee right now. We got in at 1.2 million. It's worth 32 million now within 9 months, right? To where you start to understand, like, hey, I probably would have spent that money doing something over a couple months. Now I put it here, and look what can happen, right? So that's it for me. That's the highs of the journey. And then teaching guys along the way. Just even somebody in Cleveland come up to me, I'm like, hey, S&P 500, you put 5,000 in there for the next 20 years, you get me. They're like, what? What's the S&P 500? So that's the fulfillment that I get. It's the journey, and that's the high. It's like, hey, along the road, you learn these things, you changed it, and look at this here. The lows is probably the opposite end of that. The things that I used to do and the money that I've blown fooling around before I understood all of this. So I would say that's the lows of the industry. And then a lot of guys come into the league and they're thinking that because they're actually competing with everybody around them. And they're seeing and looking at the music videos, they're hitting the rap songs, and they think that this is actually where the money is supposed to go. This is what makes you cool. But like Nipsey Hussle said, when you get the money, you want to feel the thrust, you want to feel the texture, you want to feel the drop top breeze, you want to feel successful. Well, if I break that down, he's basically saying that you're already successful when you get the money. Don't go out trying to impress everybody else that don't have it, that you have it, and lose it. So that's it for me. Just the journey of understanding that, the high and the low of that, that's the best for me.
I love that, Donte. Have your money work for you. It's like you just take a small amount and have it grow.
Yes.
So Donte, sticking on that for
you're
one
already cute now because you're rich. So you don't have to do nothing else.
Stick on that for 1 second. Out of the purchases you made, the younger version of you, what purchase do you remember that you just shake your head at? You're like, I cannot believe I actually.
I remember at one point, I probably had $1 million worth of jewelry.
You love jewelry, didn't you?
Yeah, but it was good quality. Like I got, a good percentage back. And that's the thing. You're not going to get all of it back. You might get 40% back. So a lot of the watch that these guys are buying in aftermarket and putting diamonds in, you're losing your money. You better stop. So when you need that and you're going to sell it, you're going to get 20% to 25% of the value. You're going to be upset. So you might as well not buy it now.
And you know he's serious because he's leaning in.
I'm dead serious. Hey, listen, he's dead serious.
If y'all watching, he leaning into it. That's like, he's serious.
The only thing that saved me with that was I was playing for the Buffalo Bills. We were playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Somebody broke in my house and stole it all.
Wow.
I had insurance on it, so I got my money back, right? So then I understood, don't do that again. Couple watches, you okay, right? So that's the only thing that saved me. There's a lot of people that don't get that lucky.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you know who told me, one more thing, Rich Paul called me and said, Whitner, they might have did you a favor, Whitner. I'm like, you know what, Richie, you right.
Tracy, what about you?
I think mine are similar on the journey side. I think more specifically like current day. I'm too old to go back to old highs and lows. This is a high for me. Being here with these guys, having this conversation around mindset changes for athletes. We started the Players Impact 4 years ago. And as an entrepreneur, you're told no a lot. No, you can't do it. That's not going to work. So the resilience to get through all of those no's when you believe in something, you believe in yourself first and foremost, you believe in the mission of what you're doing. This is a high because 4 years later, we're having this conversation. The 10-year, 13-lender NFL veterans, they have a different category that they are able to play with as far as that risky asset class, right? We're truly democratizing opportunities so that the female ice hockey Olympians, the soccer players with all their pay inequality conversations we're having these days, they're able to participate and get access to these same high-profile deals at much smaller dollar amounts. And when those women and these athletes get 6x returns in 2 years, and we're seeing that generational growth, a generational wealth start to grow for them, that's a game changer. And I feel really proud about where we've come and the athletes' lives that we've impacted in that way to help them change their mindset and to learn that they can participate in this ecosystem.
If you want to learn about perseverance, they should read Walt Disney's book with his brother Roy. It talks about perseverance, how many times he was told no, how many times he almost went bankrupt, and you see what happened. So that's the thing. That's the beauty of perseverance. When you continue to persevere, eventually it clicks and then you take off.
That's hard though. That's the hard. That's the hard part, because usually that perseverance, and like you said earlier, people tell the story. I was poor, So I mean, it's perseverance is hard, man. But like my mom, in my background, my dad played in the NFL, but at that time, like I had a double life. I lived in Southeast DC, Maryland, part of the time, but the Cowboys weren't making that type of money like we were making today. And then I lived with my dad, and I had a decent life. But for the most part, you get that grit, man. You get that grit, and so perseverance is something like you go back to knowing yourself. If you're gonna play in this game, you got to have that type of perseverance.
I want each of you.
I leave it at that. Like that.
Yeah, and Donte, I love what you said about the Walt Disney thing, is because people don't see. They see Disney World, they see all of that, but they don't see the time that they bet their life savings on a character, or that they were up 23 hours straight working on something. So we don't see that.
Another book, Elon Musk. When you read his book, everything that he went through to get where he is and trying to sell to Apple, on the brink of going bankrupt, staying up 24, 48 hours, sending rockets to the middle of the desert and it costs you $330 million and you're running low on your budget, right? People don't see those things and they really don't take the time to read those things. They think he just woke up and was an overnight success, and it never happens like that.
Yeah.
I want each of you to point people towards where they can learn more. Tracy, why don't we start with you and the Players Impact? Where should people go online and to learn more?
World Wide Web, www.theplayersimpact.com.
All right.
I mean, I welcome any conversation with folks that are interested in what we do, and so start there.
Cool. Donte, what about you?
This book at Convention, the first book, it's called
Angel?
No. It's a book. I forget the name of it. I'll let Shawn go. I think it's gonna come to me. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, you're just talking about something that people can just learn more about.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought we were talking about.
No, yeah, that's right. No, it's perfect. I want people to check out what you guys are working on now. So, what website they could learn more. So.
Go to Windpact.com, WINDPACT.com for mine. And we're actually going through a rebrand of our website. But, if you have any questions, I tell people, hit me on LinkedIn. I take all questions and talk to people.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
I'll eventually get there.
LinkedIn and curlingcapital.com.
Awesome.
That's where you'll find out everything that we're doing. We're teaching athletes dividend growth and how the truly wealthy people do their money, the rule of 72, right? How every 4 years you'll double the dividend income, and every 7 years you'll double the principal. So if the athletes understand this in the public markets, you won't see guys going broke. So if you just keep your bills under what your dividends are paying, it's going to double you every 4 years. If you don't add more bills, when you get more income, then you're set for life. So that's what people understand. So a lot of the families that have Walmart and all these Whirlpool families, this is how they do their money. They put it in the same stocks, 4% of the stocks return 96%. They get the dividend income, they flip the principal, and they don't touch it. They don't buy silly things.
First of all, I want to be the first one to thank all of you. Everyone check out KirtlandHillsCapital.com. Check out theplayersimpact.com. Check out Windpact.com. And thank you all.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.